"This is going to sound insane," Angelina Jolie once admitted, "but there was a time I was going to hire somebody to kill me. She had it all figured out, planning to withdraw the payment in small amounts to avoid suspicion. She wanted it to look like a murder, believing it would spare her family the guilt that comes with suicide. What stopped her wasn't a change of heart, but the hitman himself. He was a decent person who gave her 2 months to reconsider, an act of kindness that inadvertently changed her life. But that terrifying confession was only the tip of the iceberg. For decades, Jolie lived through pain that fame only disguised. From broken family roots, brutal bullying, and a spiral into drugs and self-harm, to psychiatric breakdowns and a war-torn divorce played out under global scrutiny, her private story has always been darker than the spotlight ever revealed. Angelina's struggles began in childhood. Born to actors Jon Voight and Marceline Bertrand, her family was torn apart when she was just a baby after Voight's incessant cheating. Raised almost entirely by her mother, she developed a deep resentment for her absent father, one that followed her well into adulthood. What most people don't know is that her early years weren't glamorous at all. Despite being the daughter of a famous actor, Jolie and her mother never had a permanent home. They moved from place to place, living in small apartments, and often struggled to pay bills. This instability made her feel like an outsider long before the world ever put her under a spotlight. She later admitted bluntly, "I was not a very stable youth." Obsessed with death from a young age, she began collecting knives, sometimes using them on herself or in rituals with boyfriends, drawing blood when she felt trapped. "Whenever I felt trapped, I'd cut myself," she recalled. "I have a lot of scars." At Beverly Hills High School, she was out of place. She was bullied for her lanky frame, thick glasses, braces, and her unusually full lips, features that later became her trademark beauty. The ridicule carved deep insecurities, leading her to embrace her own brand of rebellion. She dressed in black, collected knives, and spoke openly about fantasies of death. By her early teens, Jolie was already slipping into darker rituals. At 14, she began cutting herself, describing it as a way to feel alive when everything else felt numb. The blade gave her control in a life where nothing else made sense, but it didn't stop there. By her late teens and early 20s, depression opened the door to heavy drug use. She later admitted she experimented with everything: coke, heroin, ecstasy, LSD, everything. Friends at the time said she was reckless, often disappearing for days in drug-fueled binges. Heroin, in particular, became a dangerous escape, one that blurred the line between survival and self-destruction. In fact, a convicted dealer later claimed he supplied her with heroin and cocaine 3 times a week in her New York apartment. A disturbing video from 1999 showed a strung-out Angelina mid-binge, shocking fans years later when it resurfaced. Her reputation in Hollywood was so volatile that when she auditioned for Lara Croft Tomb Raider in 2001, producers forced her to undergo daily drug tests just to prove she was clean enough to work. Casting directors often found her too dark, and her father turned his back completely. She was spiraling. Her weight dropped dangerously low, and insomnia left her exhausted and volatile. At one point, she admitted she was using every drug you can imagine while still barely in her 20s. Her role in the 1998 HBO film Gia reflected that chaos all too perfectly. To embody supermodel Gia Karangi, who herself battled addiction and died of AIDS, Jolie shut herself off from reality. She told her then-husband she was alone, dying, and gay, refusing to break character. The performance won her a Golden Globe but left her broken, triggering a nervous breakdown that landed her in a psychiatric ward. The press ate it up. By the late 90s, Angelina Jolie was branded Hollywood's wild child. At her first wedding to actor Jonny Lee Miller, she wore black rubber pants and a white t-shirt smeared with his name in her own blood. But behind the symbolism, that marriage was fragile. Jolie later admitted she was too young, too restless, and too self-destructive to be a stable partner. She and Miller split after only a few years, though they remained friends long after. For Jolie, the breakup reinforced a painful narrative. Stability always slipped away. During that same period, she began a passionate affair with model Jenny Shimizu, admitting she could have married her if life had unfolded differently. Then came the infamous red carpet kiss with her brother, the whirlwind Vegas marriage to Bob Thornton, and the vials of each other's blood, actually small lockets with droplets, that became tabloid legend. But Thornton wasn't ready for family life. Jolie was adopting Maddox at the time, and Bob later admitted he felt overwhelmed and unprepared. The split devastated her because she had envisioned raising a child together, only to be left alone. The heartbreak was compounded by her Father Jon Voight's public betrayal, calling her mentally ill in the media. Her mental health during this marriage was fragile. She once admitted she suffered a breakdown when she couldn't reach Billy Bob, ending up on a 72-hour hold at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. Each failed marriage deepened her mistrust in love and reinforced her sense of abandonment. Instead of feeling chosen, Jolie often felt discarded, like men loved the chaos around her more than the real woman she was inside. Then came Brad Pitt, the golden boy. On the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, sparks flew, though Pitt was still married to Jennifer Aniston. Jolie, haunted by her own father's infidelity, denied any affair at the time. "I could not look at myself in the morning if I did that," she said firmly. But soon after Pitt's separation, a controversial W magazine spread titled Domestic Bliss introduced them as a couple, enraging Aniston, who called it insensitive. The media crowned them Brangelina, and together they built what magazines called a modern-day fairy tale, a blended family of 6 children from across the world. But behind the headlines, the cracks widened. Jolie admitted she never fully trusted Brad, even in their best years. The pressure of raising 6 kids, juggling global fame, and their very different approaches to parenting all weighed heavily. She has spoken of feeling alone even inside the relationship, a wound that cut deeper after the birth of their twins, when she battled postpartum depression and exhaustion. The final fracture came in 2016 on that private plane. An alleged altercation between Brad and their son Maddox set the end in motion. By the time the plane landed, Jolie had filed for divorce. "I separated for the well-being of my family. It was the right decision," she later said. What followed was one of Hollywood's ugliest divorces. Pitt sought 50-50 custody, while Jolie fought for what she saw as her children's stability. She accused Pitt of abuse, while he accused her of manipulating the system. Their French vineyard, Chateau Miraval, became another battlefield when Pitt sued her for selling her share to the Stoli Group, and she countersued, claiming he tried to silence her with an NDA about his behavior. Nearly 8 years later, the toxic court battle still drags on. Sources say the fight has worn her thin. Friends worry that while her resilience is awe-inspiring, it's also self-destructive. Motherhood had long been both Jolie's salvation and her battlefield. After her split from Billy Bob Thornton, who walked away, saying he wasn't ready for fatherhood, she moved forward with adopting her first son, Maddox, alone. Her father, Jon Voight, then publicly betrayed her, telling the media she had serious mental problems. Jolie was furious. They could have decided, "He's right, she's crazy, let's remove that child from her custody," and that's unforgivable. But she doubled down on motherhood. "I knew once I committed to Maddox," she said, "I would never be self-destructive again." Her 6 children became her lifeline. "Having children saved me," she told Vogue. "They taught me to live in this world differently." To Jolie, her kids aren't just family, they're her closest allies. But the fight to protect them, while raising them amid endless headlines, has taken its toll. The darkness in her life never fully disappeared. Jolie once described standing alone in her kitchen at 3 a.m., holding a knife, wondering if her children might be better off without her. Her fascination with knives had begun in adolescence, when she and boyfriends would play games with blades, pressing the edge against their skin. Even in adulthood, her collection stayed hidden away, but never gone. One bad night could always trigger relapse. Years later, after the brutal divorce, Jolie finally took action. She drove her oldest knife to a scrapyard and asked the foreman to melt it down into rebar. "Maybe it'll become a bridge," she told him. "Let it hold something up for once." It was a symbolic ending, taking a weapon once tied to destruction and turning it into something that could hold weight, maybe even carry others across. The next time a headline shrieks about subpoenas or vineyard lawsuits, remember the unseen story. A woman who once planned her own murder is now forging bridges from the very metal that nearly destroyed her. Angelina Jolie's life has never been the glossy fairy tale Hollywood tried to sell. It's been jagged, messy, and soaked in pain. Each broken marriage left her battling abandonment, mistrust, and exhaustion, but also forced her to rebuild, stronger. From drug addiction and self-harm to divorce wars and public betrayals, she has repeatedly found ways to rise, not through perfection, but through resilience. As she nears 50, she admits she's still in transition, still trying to rediscover who she is after a decade of feeling lost. But one thing is clear, she survived the dark and dangerous years when she wasn't supposed to. So what do you think? Which part of Jolie's journey shocked you the most? The drugs, the failed marriages, or the hitman confession? Drop your thoughts below and hit like if this story gave you perspective.